Hi, good afternoon. We're talking with Jean Fruth and Jeff Idelson. Jean is a photographer, author. They've got a book out now. She's got a book out now on grassroots baseball. She's been a photographer for the A's and the Giants and was a traveling photographer for the Baseball Hall of Fame. And of course, Jeff Idelson is the former president of the Hall of Fame, who is now living life in San Francisco, retired, and there's a big smile on his face. I think he's glad he doesn't have to travel as much. So Jeff and Jean, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be with you, Bob.
Jean, tell me how did the idea come about for the book?
Before I tell you that, I have one question for Jeff.
Okay.
Jeff, for all the money, this is the big question of the day. What are Bob's two dogs' name?
Oh my goodness. Well, I could go with Pat and Dick.
No, they'd appreciate it.
That's Pat.
Three guesses. One's gone.
That was a reference to Pat Kelly, who used to run the photo archive at the Hall of Fame, and her wonderful husband Richard, Dick Kelly. Fenway and Yankee.
Oh, yeah, he used to be a friend, and you mentioned Yankee. I mean, come on, man.
Fenway and Park.
One right.
You got one. You're 50% there.
You're 50% there.
That's impressive already.
Fenway and Fresno.
Okay, Bob, let him.
I'll let him in. It's Crosley.
Fenway and Crosley.
Okay, sorry for the distraction, but I just
that was
love
good.
That.
My little schnauzer is Crosley, and he's a feisty little guy, and his name fits. So
that's great.
Yeah, dogs are awesome. Dogs are awesome. So Jean, tell us about the book.
All right, sorry about that. So grassroots baseball, where legends begin. Bob, as I was traveling, shooting the major league game and the professional game around the world, I always took time to shoot the grassroots game. Everything from kids in sandlots in Mexico to old guys playing stickball on the streets of New York City. And this, the archives for these images, it was growing tremendously over the years. I mean, just all over Japan, Puerto Rico, in the U.S., outside the U.S. And the images have never been seen before. It was just a personal project. And during my tenure with the Baseball Hall of Fame as their traveling photographer, I had the opportunity to meet a lot of the Hall of Famers, work with some of them on projects, take portraits during Hall of Fame weekend and Classic weekend, and got to hear their stories and know some of them. The stories of them growing up playing baseball were just so wonderful to me, hearing Ricky Henderson's story, Nolan Ryan's story, and I thought, how great it would be to pair these stories of these legends with amateur baseball, with the grassroots game, and kids just like them starting off in Binger, Oklahoma, like Johnny Bench, growing up in small towns. And before, it was money and contracts, and just the love of the game, just like it's played today in all those places. In the Dominican Republic, like Vladimir Guerrero started off, in poverty-stricken areas and making his way all the way to the Hall of Fame. And so the book is 15 chapters around the world, and it's the stories that the legends tell really make it special.
That's awesome, because we all did. Jeff, you played when we were kids. We played pickup games, we'd play over the line or whatever, and we'd always have our favorite player that we were as a kid, and try to emulate their batting stance. My favorite player, of course, was Yaz. And my shoulders hurt to this day from trying to do that stance he had with the bat held way up in the air. But, what you were saying is baseball in its purest form when you're a kid. I mean, you don't have the money. You're not poisoned by anything. You play it because you want to play it. You want to beat your buddies. You want to hit the ball farther than your buddy, and you just have a good time. That's basically what kids should do with baseball. Just have fun with it and just be a kid, like most major leaguers are in the World Series. They're a little kid.
So true.
And now you're on a grassroots. You guys have the grassroots tour going on too with the van, right, Jeff?
We did. We had the RV, the Coachman Galleria last year when we launched grassroots baseball. yeah, we took the concept, Bob, of Jean's incredible book, and Jean had an idea or a dream to turn it into more than a book. And so we got together and decided to put together a give back program. We're both in that phase of life where we want to give back to the game. And so we put together a program where we could try to grow the game in underprivileged communities, and came together with the idea of launching it in the US. And where more Americana than Route 66. So last summer we started out in the Coachman Galleria filled with Rawlings baseball gloves, Rawlings baseballs, Big League Chew bubblegum are three of our big sponsors, and headed out those 2,400 miles, 8 states, and we were able to have 10 clinics in those 8 states along the way, mostly with Boys and Girls Clubs, Bob, and we brought in some Hall of Famers and other baseball legends who grew up along Route 66, and went into these clubs and had just really meaningful visits with groups of kids, with guys like Jim Thome, guys like Trevor Hoffman, George Brett, Johnny Bench, Ozzie Smith, Billy Hatcher, and Goose Gossage, who was our national spokesman and was with us on 3 of those. And each one delivered their own message, their own inspirational message, and then introduced the game, gave these kids gloves and balls that had never had an opportunity to play or very little. And the smiles on the faces, the stories we heard, the reactions that we got were all so good about what we had thought, and in many cases, even more than we had hoped. And the program was launched very successfully.
That's great, because like we were talking about it, I love to see the smile on little kids' faces when they first are learning to play the game and figuring it out, and then they advance into Little League and stuff. My nephew Evan was in Little League for a long time, and he's in high school now, but he loved it. And to see just to see the joy on the kids' faces when they play, it's like, you're a kid, and that's what it's all about. That's where the future of baseball is with our kids, and they're like you guys are doing. You're bringing the grassroots to Route 66 area. You're getting more kids to use the gloves and teaching them how to play the game a little bit, and letting them have fun. Get the parents aside. Don't let the parents interfere. Just let the kids be kids, because that's what growing up is all about.
Sure is. And yeah, and it was really successful last year. And I think Jean has the seeds for perhaps the second book. And I don't know, Jean, if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, Jean, do we have a scoop here?
We do. Grassroots Baseball Route 66 is a project started last year along the route when we were doing the clinics. And I have another season of shooting in front of me to complete it, which won't happen this year, obviously. So it's delayed for another season, but that's okay. So what we're putting together essays similar to the last book in that way, where we'll have some legends along Route 66 telling their story, and then just all the Americana, tying in that to baseball along the route is really, it's an exciting project. And I've already had some shooting in quite a few of the states, and I'm feeling really, really good about it. And there's just, it's a good sequel for grassroots baseball where legends begin. So
I think
more on that.
I think it's great. I mean, the more last time I saw you guys was last July in Napa at your book signing, and Noreen and I, my wife and I, were thumbing through the book, and we were like, wow, these images were just the way you have it, you have the photographers I like I do. And could you explain to people, because I was asked this on a radio show, a buddy of mine asked me, he said, Bob, what goes into a photo for you of a ballpark? So could you maybe expound upon that a little bit and say, what goes into your thought process when you see something through your viewfinder?
That's a great question. For me, action is exhilarating for sure, right? So if it's action, you want the peak of action. You want the athlete at his or her peak moment. And those images, of course, are fun to take. And, I still love shooting action. For grassroots, it's got to be more than that for me. It can't just be an action shot. It's got to do a lot more. It's got to tell a story. And so what am I looking for, when I'm looking through my camera and I'm framing, it's got to have a sense of place. So what is my background? Grassroots baseball, it's got to be about the culture. So it's got to tell the story. And baseball looks different in different places. And that was my job with the book. Because baseball in Japan looks very different than baseball in Mobile, Alabama, as does baseball in New York City versus baseball in Mexico. So your job is to tell that story. So who are your subjects? What is your background? And there's so many things you can put into your image, you know, with planning, to tell the story. And that's what we do. And, you know, as a photographer, we're storytellers. And so that's the goal. And that was the goal for grassroots baseball. And that's the goal every day when we're out there.
It's like I've taught some people to shoot, and I think you'll appreciate this. You can give 3 people the same camera and the same subject, and you're going to get 3 different images. You know, and I tell people, it's what you see. Don't worry about making it perfect. Make sure your exposure is right, obviously, and stuff like that. But tell me what you see with your eyes, not my eyes, but your eyes. And you want to see different people. And with you, you know, you have that eye where you can catch just the most incredible moment. Like in the book, some of those photos, I just can't believe how you got those. They're just, you know, with the sun going down, and it's like the orangey, the warm glows of the photo. It looks great.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, you know, we're certainly, you know, we chase light. That's part of it.
Yes.
And you could appreciate this as well, because with grassroots baseball, one of the fun things for me was I got to make choices on when I was shooting. Not all the time, of course, but let's say I went to Texas shooting the high school baseball championship, state championship games. And they would start maybe at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. and then they'd go all the way to the evening. Well, I get to the first one, I get there early because I get the pretty early morning light and get some of that. In the afternoon, I'm not really interested in that light because it's not so pretty, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, but go back and you get that 4 o'clock magic hour, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. And, you know, that's when the magic happens. So unlike, you know, a game at the Oakland Coliseum or the San Francisco Giants, well, if the 7:15 is the start, nothing much we can do about that. So it's something else we have to capture, but it was fun to make the plan, and it's so much planning really. At the end of the day, is always having a plan, is chasing that light and setting it up for, you know, the best case scenario of trying to capture it.
Well, you've shot at the Oakland Coliseum, as have I, and you shot at Candlestick too, right?
Yes, yeah, and then 49ers, San Francisco 49ers at Candlestick, the very last game.
Oh my, yeah, that the stick was what it was. People hated it. Other teams hated going there, but it offered you some unique lighting, especially in the fall. You know, with the way the sun was positioned for a 49ers game, as opposed to you know, high noon or 1 o'clock in July. Yeah,
it was pretty light, and it was unique. The lighting that in the Candlestick was absolutely beautiful. Though I have to say the new stadium has some amenities that I appreciate.
Box is much better.
It has a ladies' room, which is really exciting.
Well, you know, every time we see Jeff and he was doing his thing with the Hall of Fame, he was always on the field, and then he was up in the press box. He never had to sit in the photographer's lounge like we do, you know. Where, and I do have a quick story. Jeff, you know, I know Fergie. I've known Fergie Jenkins for forever, and I had a media pass, Gene, in 1977. I was a college freshman, and I kind of BS'd my way into a media pass from the Angels, and they just happened to be playing the Red Sox. Shocking, I know. Fergie was the first guy to greet me. And I talked to Fergie a few weeks ago, and he goes, I remember that day. We talked cameras. And Fergie's introducing me to everybody. And I'm like their little brother. And I kid you not, I was sitting in the dugout for the whole game, which, as you know, you cannot do anymore. And Fergie was calling George Scott and all these big guys down, Fisk, and everybody blocking, but they didn't want Don Zimmer to see me. So Dwight Evans strikes out, and he comes back and uses every 4-letter word you can think of and sits down right next to me. And I don't know why I said it. I said, Dewey, you'll get him next time. He hits a home run, and I'm not kidding. The next time up, he looks for me and high-fives me in the dugout. As an 18-year-old, I'm thinking, I've lived my life now, you know?
Fabulous.
But Gene, memories like that, especially when you develop a bond with some players, which we all do. You've got your favorites, you've got your not so favorites, but it's kind of nice when they recognize you and say, "Hey, how you doing? Nice to see you again. Make me look good."
Yeah, it is. It is, and you capture something different with that player when you gain the trust and you have the relationship. You get. I mean, you'll get some more time. Maybe you'll get an extra minute or two to get your portrait or whatever it is that you need. And so, yeah, the more you shoot the sport and the more you go back to the same place, and the more consistently you're going to get it and develop the relationships, which are extremely important.
And we're in a small minority. Everybody doesn't know everybody personally, but everybody knows everybody else. You know what I mean? Different team photographers and broadcasters and media relations people. And you don't want to screw up. You want to keep it above board and, do your job because you don't want anybody mad at you, especially people.
The Bay Area photographers, though, what a great group they are. I really owe them so much for my career as a sports photographer. I mean, they were nothing but helpful, both at the Oakland A's, San Francisco Giants, and the 49ers. I mean, all the guys that were shooting then, all the photographers, anytime I had a question or needed something, it was really a positive experience. We were lucky in the Bay Area to have that group of photographers that we still have.
We are, and the Z-Man, that guy has more stories than anybody. Michael Zagaris, he is a character.
Yeah, he's just one of a kind, such a special guy, and his behind the scenes work is like no other.
Oh, I know. I've talked to him several times, and he's like, man, he wants to talk. He loves to talk music too, because he's done so many rock concerts and things like that, and he's probably forgotten more than he knows.
The amazing thing is he forgets nothing. His memory is incredible. And when he talks to the players, he'll remember where they went to school and their record, and then he'll tell stories about their father and where they played and where they went to school, and he's amazing. His memory is just incredible, and he's his rock and roll. He has a book, Total Excess. Sorry, which is it's a phenomenal rock and roll book. So I recommend it highly.
Well, yeah, being in the Bay Area in the 70s, and even I wasn't here in the 60s. I've only been up here 15 years. I'm from Southern California originally, but I had the Hollywood scene in the 70s and the 80s. There were no survivors. There was a lot of fun, but the stuff you would see and the music you would hear was amazing. Jeff, you know a lot about music. There's probably something people don't know is that you worked in radio stations before you got into sports.
I did. I mean, I was sort of kind of feeling my way through college, Bob, and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And at first I thought I wanted to be a play-by-play guy. And so I thought, oh, well, I'll get into radio. And I DJ'd in college. I mean, as a lot of kids do. And so I had a couple of internships with news stations. And in college, I remember booking the 15th anniversary Woodstock show for WBZ in Boston. And that was like the highlight of my summer, booking some of the guests that helped put that on. But, eventually I ended up in sports, which is where I wanted to be, and have no regrets of the path I chose.
And you started out as a vendor at Fenway Park because you are from Massachusetts. You're from outside of Boston.
I am. I grew up with baseball, went to my first game when I was 5. And then my best friend growing up, Larry Pike, who I'm still friends with, he's a financial planner now up there. He and I went in and were vendors together for, 6 or 7 years from maybe age 15 through college. And there was nothing better than going to the ballpark, Bob. It was hard work, and you didn't make a ton of money, but we had jobs that were at the ballpark, which was really cool. And the great thing was that you had to cash in all your chips and settle up in the 7th inning. So that meant you got to hang out for the 8th and 9th if you wanted to. And for me, that was pure bliss.
Fenway Park, if people have not been to Fenway Park, Jeff and Jean, you will probably attest to this. If you're any kind of baseball or sports fan, you must make a pilgrimage once in your life to Fenway Park. It is like nothing you will ever, it's pure magic when you walk in there. It's like It's like old Yankee Stadium. It's sacred ground. I mean, you've got the green monster right there that you literally could look out, like you could reach out and grab it and touch it. And, you just think, hey, Babe Ruth actually played here, Ted Williams, all these guys played here. Yaz, Fisk. And it's just a magical place. And I've been going for 43 years now. And hopefully when this virus is over, we'll get back again soon. But Jeff, your Hall of Fame career now, you started in it was 2008, became the president of the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I started during a strike in '94 there.
And you were media relations before that, like you were with the Red Sox and that team from the Bronx. And that's how Jeff and I met, was through Pat Kelly one day, some 25 years ago, and when you were still doing your media. And you've seen the Hall through some difficult times, and it's really your group that you worked with, they really made the Hall something special to go to now. It's a fun place to go. It's, there's so many exhibits and interactions and things to do. It's not just, the Hall of Plaques. There's so much to see. It's a 2-day event. It's not a 1-day event. It's hard to get through it in one day, Jeff, as you know, and Jean, as you know. Tell me, Jeff, what is your greatest, what is your personal memory, your favorite thing that you did with the Hall of Fame?
Oh, Bob, that's such a loaded question that can go in so many directions. I don't know that I have a singular favorite moment, but some of the highlights were helping. The induction every year was always, of course, right at the top, because I'm no different than you or anybody else who's watching today. We're all at the core baseball fans. I'm just lucky enough to have gotten to work in the industry, and to have, your baseball cards come to life, so to speak, by being in Cooperstown is pretty impressive and pretty incredible for all of us. And the great thing about Cooperstown is the access that fans have to the players. And I had even more access, which was really great. And what you learn is that these guys are really no different than any of us. They just happen to excel at baseball. So I think the relationships I built with the Hall of Famers over the years was great. Some of the artifacts I was able to acquire as part of the team there are very special and have great meaning. For instance, early on, spending a lot of time with Arlene Howard, Elston Howard's widow, and Elston Howard integrated the Yankees in 1956. And, in really working with her to put Elston's uniform in Cooperstown is a symbol of his greatness, and what he meant to the Yankees is one example. To collecting the bat that Luis Gonzalez used to get his improbable hit off of Mariano Rivera to end Game 7 of the 2001 World Series, that very dramatic and traumatic World Series after 9/11, was another poignant moment. To the home run chase in '98, what we know about it now is unfortunate, but at the time it was incredible. And to have the opportunity to spend time in St. Louis and Chicago over the course of a month and be part of history and connect the Hall of Fame to that history was something I'll never forget.
Jeff, I've gotten several questions, and it's basically the same question. It's a two-parter. Everybody thinks that you guys in the Hall, a lot of people think that the Hall of Fame elects the Hall of Famers. That's not true. Tell them how the Hall of Fame process, tell them who votes and how the person is elected. And also obviously the elephant in the room is Pete Rose. He's on the ineligible list, as we all know, and Pete did it to himself. But people that want him in, I don't think it's going to happen. But explain to the people how somebody gets into the Hall.
Bob, it's hard to get into the Hall of Fame. Really, really hard. Baseball Writers of America have the privilege of voting who makes it to Cooperstown. And to have a vote among the writers, you have to have covered the game for 10 years and have really an invested interest. And then players appear on a ballot after having been retired for 5 and having played at least 10. And that's the only requirement for showing up on a ballot, other than being on the eligible list, which Pete Rose isn't. Voters then vote. There's about 400 to 500 of them every year that cast ballots independently, and you have to be named on 75% of those ballots cast or an election. So it makes it really difficult to get in. Those that get there truly deserve to be there. 1% of those to have worn a major league uniform have a plaque in Cooperstown. Pete Rose, unfortunately, is not in that group, because of his gambling. And, having spent 8 years with major league clubs and seeing the rules about which you must abide, and gambling, there's no gambling allowed in baseball, every single day walking in the clubhouse, made it very clear that that was not acceptable in that time. And, Pete chose to gamble. That was his choice. It's an addiction. It's no different than any other addiction. And I don't fault him for it. It just is what it is. But it precludes him from being eligible because he went on baseball's permanent ineligible list. But for Pete Rose fans who go to Cooperstown, there's at least 20 artifacts from his career that help tell that story, because the museum has to be true to the sport and tell the game's history, and you can't tell the history of baseball without including Pete Rose.
And that's the same thing with Barry Bonds. Some of his stuff is in there, yet Barry and Roger Clemens are not in yet. And that's due to as we know, the big black eye that we've had over the last 20 years was the steroids. And it's a shame, but it is what it is. It's been discussed and rediscussed 50,000 times, and unfortunately, that's the same thing with Pete. That's the way it is. He broke the rules. They broke the rules, and it's sad, but it's just a part of baseball. But the
difference between them and Pete is that they're not on baseball's ineligible list. So at any time, that tide could change if it wanted to, and they are eligible for election. And neither one of them ever was proven they tested positive for steroids. But the cloud of suspicion is enough that the writers have given pause to considering them for baseball's greatest honor.
And then it is, we are seeing that Clemens and Bonds, their numbers are starting to rise a little bit, to get inducted into that 75%. It looks like it's probably going to have to go to the Veterans Committee to get them in now. Is that a possibility, or do you think the writers may get them in?
It's hard to say. I mean, they're right up around 60%, and as we talked about, needing 75%, but they're also running out of runway, so to speak. I believe each one has 2 years of eligibility left, and making up 15% in 2 years with a cloud of suspicion is going to be difficult. Could happen. It might happen. You never know. But if not, the great thing about veterans committees is that they're there as a court of appeals, and if the sentiment changes down the line, it gives them a vehicle for earning election.
Yeah, that's a good point. Jean, let me ask you this. You've covered baseball a long time. Do you have a favorite player that you absolutely love to shoot, or is there one out there? Who was your favorite player growing up first? Let's ask that.
I don't have a favorite player to shoot. Growing up, my family was a hockey family. My grandfather was a Mets fan and listened to Mets games on the radio. I worked at a restaurant as a teenager, and they were Mets fans, the owners. So I got an opportunity to spend some time at Shea Stadium because of this restaurant owner and their family would take me. But my love of baseball came really when I was coaching my son's Little League games much later. He's 23 now, so it was also a long time ago. But so when I was coaching baseball for my son's team, I really started to appreciate the culture of baseball a lot more. Just different than other sports. How it ties generations together, how it brings father, son, grandfather, mother, son, in our case, and I love all the history and the deep roots of the game. That's really what makes it different than really any other sport. Sure, I'm biased, but you just don't have that deep culture in other sports like you do with baseball. And going to the Baseball Hall of Fame and the museum, and you really get that sense for just how deep the culture runs, and all the players and all the people who make up the national pastime. It's just so much more than the players. Is just it goes in so many different directions, from fans to executives to umpires, writers, and hopefully photographers.
Yes, you have photos hanging in the Hall of Fame, correct, Jean?
I do, and you know, what an honor that is. You know, to have just to be a small part of an exhibit is just, you know, just an honor, and so exciting for me. And I'm so grateful that I was able to contribute to their archives for those years. And so for me, that's what it is. It's really the love of the game more than a team or a player. And you probably think I'm copping out and not and avoiding, but I'm really not. I really just, and I don't have, and players move from team to team. I don't have a favorite team, though. I love the underdog story. So, you know, anytime, you know, the underdog can be in, you know, that's why I always love the Oakland A's story. You know, it's just when those guys, like, somehow, you know, they're scrappy teams, you know, make it all the way into the playoffs, and you want to see them just go further and do something with it. Or that year that the Cubs won the World Series, being able to document those games was just an incredible experience. And, you know, what a story. And the people who've been waiting so long for their team to win a World Series. Like, I can't get enough of those stories. And that's what I love about it, love about the game.
Well, as you both know, I am my whole family is from New England. I'm the only one born in California. But I've been a Red Sox fan since I was 5 years old. In '04, I mean, the stolen base heard around the world. My wife will attest. When they won the World Series, I lost it. I can still picture it, ground ball back to Folk. And, you know, it's something. The World Series was almost anticlimactic for me in '04 because of what they did to the Yankees. And, you know, finally seeing the Red Sox win the World Series, you know, you can die a happy person. You know, my mom never saw the Red Sox win the World Series. And, you know, it's just, you know, it's that it brings that little boy in you out when something like that happens. You know, my wife is a long time, she's from San Diego, so she's been a Padre fan her whole life. And, you know, we're waiting for that day when the Padres raise the flag and they can get their no-hitter and hopefully a World Championship. And Jeff, you know, growing up at Fenway Park, I mean, you're living my dream as a kid, you know? So did you have a favorite player growing up when you were in Boston, Jeff, when you were a kid?
Oh, well, I had a bunch. I mean, I had all of them. I mean, we had, you know, our local supermarket there, like you know, you have your Safeway here. We had the Star Market, and the deal at Star Market was if you spent, like, I don't know, $20 in groceries, you got a color 8x10 on glossy paper of one of the players. And, you know, they had the whole team, and I'm like eating as much as I can. I'm not a big guy. I'm like imploring my mother to go back to the Star Market and spend $20 so I can get another one. It's my whole wall. My bedrooms were lined with all these these pictures of guys. And I loved Yaz like you did, and, you know, practice the batting stance. And then when the Gold Dust Twins came along in '75, and, you know, I wanted to be Fred Lynn. I mean, I respected Dwight Evans' arms. I used to throw as far and hard as I could and not come as close as I could to matching him. But, you know, they all had a role. They were all part of my universe. There was George Scott. I loved the boomer. He wore his helmet in the field. I mean, I don't know. And of course, Pudge, and I was devastated when he went to the White Sox. I mean, they were all, I loved them all, Bob.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yaz was my favorite. You know, I got to know Dwight Evans a little bit, and Dewey had the second best arm I've ever seen. Clemente had the best I ever saw, bar none. I remember as a kid, remember the old black and white NBC game of the week in the '60s, where it was at Ford's Field, and they were either playing the Cardinals or the Cubs, and I remember Clemente going back to the wall, catching the ball on the run, whirling, not planting his foot, and throwing a strike on one hop to home plate. And I thought, and I was like 8 years old. I said, that's impossible. You can't do that. And, you know, he had a flair for the dramatic, especially with his arm.
He did. And, you know, Jean has a pretty poignant story from Jean, when you might want to tell it. I just think it's great about going to Puerto Rico and what you documented down there, you know, out with Vera. I just think it's such a lovely story if you feel like sharing it.
Please, Jean, share it with us.
I had the opportunity to work with Jorge Colon Delgado, who's a baseball historian in Puerto Rico. and I asked him to help me document everything Clemente in Puerto Rico. And he loved the project. He said, he'd never really done that, but of course he had all the knowledge. And we went to the first ballpark he ever played at, the schools that he went to, the church he got married in, just all these different locations around Puerto Rico. Just telling the story of Roberto Clemente through pictures. And then I was looking for where the plane went down, and we had a hard time finding the exact location of that. And Jorge and I were standing basically on a beach looking up, trying to figure out which way planes fly and where exactly it might be. And we were just a bit off and just trying to figure it out. And then I had the opportunity to meet with Vera. And one of my questions was going to be, do I have the right location, and could she help me with that, or maybe her son Luis, or one of her sons. So and Vera was kind enough we were going to have lunch, and she invited us over. It was Christmas Eve of all time, so I didn't want to really infringe on the family. I was shooting Winter League ball down there. So, and my son was playing baseball in Australia. He was 16 at the time, and I was crushed that I was going to miss Christmas with him. So I went to Puerto Rico and shot baseball. So anyway, I went to Vera Clemente's house, which you can imagine what an honor this is, the same house where she lived with Roberto, where they raised their kids. And just ringing the doorbell, just brought chills to me, and her answering was just such a moment for Jorge and I to be able to spend time with her. And they were so gracious with their time, and the whole family was there. And they actually wouldn't let us leave. We ended up staying for dinner, and they were just incredibly gracious. And then I did ask Vera about the location, and she told me that on the morning of the day, the anniversary of the plane crash, her and her family go to the location, and they throw flowers in the ocean, and they say a prayer. So I thought about it for a moment, but I know it's a private family situation, and I asked her if she'd be open at all to me documenting it, since I was there and I was going to be there through January 1st. So she talked with Luis, and they agreed to say, yes, we'll allow you to document it. And nobody had documented it before. It was just their family. So being able to go there and document this moment of Vera looking out into the ocean, and them showing me, and her telling me the details of the search for Roberto, and then the prayer was just, it was so much. They threw the flowers in, and then she asked me to put my cameras down and join them and hold hands and say the prayer. So that was a incredible moment, and I miss Vera. My relationship with her after that grew, and she said, I'll always have family in Puerto Rico, and her sons are delightful, and daughter-in-laws, and it's a big loss to lose Vera. So, but again, it's a memory that I'm forever grateful for.
Yeah, her husband was, you see the documentaries on Roberto, and he loved kids. He loved teaching the kids. And I think, and Jeff, you may agree with this, I think he is one of the most underrated superstars in baseball. I mean, he was in a class by himself. He could do it all. I mean, he was that good. There's nothing that man couldn't do.
He's definitely was a five-tool player, Bob, and oftentimes those that have special ability are underrated. You think Cal Ripken's underrated because people think of him about the streak, but he's a 3,000 hit guy, and Roberto Clemente's in that same class. Just a true five-tool player. I think if anybody reminds me of him, it was Ichiro. Came closest, maybe just in terms of overall body type and how he approached the game, but. Clemente set the bar, and it's going to be a while, if ever, before it's ever reached.
Like we talked about, his arm, everybody talks about Dave Parker and some of these other guys, but, it wasn't just his arm. He could, he always, when Clemente came to the plate, he always looked like something was wrong with him. His crick in his neck, and he was always moving around. And next thing you know, he's standing on second base with a double. And, the pitcher's looking at him like, wait a minute, but he just had that natural ability that's God-given, that's very few players have. You know, Willie Mays had it, Hank Aaron has it. Not everybody has that God-given ability.
No, and I mean, in a lot of ways, you can think of him as a six-tool player because his humanitarianism was just as good as all the other pieces of him, and that's very rare, as we all know. And he used a total package.
He was. Now, this is a Hall of Fame question. I've talked to a few people that we both know through the Hall, Pat Kelly being one, and she says that Sandy Koufax is regarded highly by just about everyone, even all the Hall of Famers. They just kind of look up to Sandy as the guy, because he was the Comet. He had that short career, but and I tell this story to a lot of people. There's only two pitchers I've ever seen in my life that I thought could throw a no-hitter anytime they wanted. Sandy was one, and Nolan Ryan was the other. You know, you knew what you were getting. You know, Billy Williams tells the story about the perfect game. You know, he knew it was coming. They weren't going to hit it anyways.
Yeah, and you throw Bob Feller into that class too with 3 no-hitters and 12 one-hitters, where you could have easily had 15 no-hitters, which is unreal. And those guys dominate. And Koufax certainly as a player was like that, the dignity, the class, how he went about his business. And, you know, to make it to the Hall of Fame, as we talked about earlier, Bob, is so hard. You know, if you make the Hall of Fame, you're a Hall of Famer. But there's then a little bit of a ledge between the Hall of Famers and the Hall of Famers. And you think of guys like Musial and Williams and Mays and Aaron and Koufax, and it's just another level. It's just another level.
Yeah, Billy Williams told me this story. He said Glenn Becker came up in the first inning of the perfect game, which to me is the greatest game ever pitched, because Bob Henley threw a one-hitter for the Cubs, one hit in a perfect game. And Becker came back to the bench.
Photographer's nightmare, right?
Glenn. And Glenn comes back and he goes, Koufax doesn't have bleep tonight. Billy was the next batter up. He comes back and he goes, boys, we ain't getting shit. And he told me and Billy was pointing his finger in my chest, and he says, let me tell you, from the 6th, 7th, 8th inning on, his hat was flying off, and he says it was a blur. He says we were getting mostly fastballs, and nobody could come close to hitting it. He says it was nothing he'd ever seen. He knew they weren't going to get anything. And that, you know, that's where legends start to grow, and the story gets bigger and bigger. It's like Wilt's 100-point game. You know, there was 5,000 people in the stands, but 150,000 people said they were there. You know, that's how the legend grows.
Yeah, try fitting more than 5,000 in the Hershey Arena, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's a cool building, by the way, too, and it's on the website. So, for me, getting to go to all these places, Jean, between you, Jeff, and I can't tell you how many ballparks we've been to. It's up in the thousands, I would assume. But Jean, you've been more international places than I have. This is for both of you. What's your favorite pro park and least favorite? Jean, I'll start with you.
Oh, favorite. It's the classics for me. I'm not saying Fenway because of you, Bob, but but Fenway, I mean, I love that classic ballpark. That's not about, slides and jumpies, but I understand the entertainment that's needed. So I get that, but there's just something so pure about the Fenways and of course Wrigley, and so those old ballparks that I mean, of course they change and they have to update them a bit, but it still has that same classic feeling, the Fenways and Wrigley. So I would say those two for my favorites.
Did you ever get to Tiger Stadium in Detroit?
No. I was in the new stadium.
Comerica?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. With the merry-go-round, that just didn't do it for me. I'm like, I'm curious.
I get it. I mean, the new Atlanta, has a zip line.
Yeah.
Jeff to go on it the first day. I said, what a photo that would make if the Hall president flew along the zip line, but he wasn't having it.
You might have to bleep out if you have sound, and he may be using a few words you don't want to get out.
Hey. In the name of grassroots baseball, do it now.
Yeah, there you go. Jeff, what about you? Your favorite?
Yeah, favorites. I like the intimate ballparks. I don't know that there's a favorite among them, but I like I like what was built in Pittsburgh, along with Fenway, Wrigley, and Seattle. I think the Giants ballpark, Oracle as it's called now, is has a lot of great angles that the ball bounces in the outfield, which I like a lot. I'd say my least favorite ballpark doesn't exist anymore, and that was the Kingdome.
Thank you. What about the Big O in Montreal? I was in there, and I just thought it's a warehouse. And I walked into the Expos clubhouse, and I'm looking around, and I'm thinking my high school locker room was nicer than this. I mean, you've been in there. It's not the best.
No, I mean Fenway's locker rooms were like that too in the '80s. I mean they were just a
Exactly.
dump and tiny, but yeah, Olympic Stadium had pretty horrible locker rooms.
Yeah, they for Montreal to get a team, and I think they're on the list. Um, that they're going to have a ballpark in place or being built. They're going to have the funds and everything to get it, because they can't continue. And it didn't work the first time in Olympic Stadium, and it won't work again. As a stopgap, yes, but for long term, no, it's just not going to do it. But the funny thing about Tiger Stadium, Pat Kelly, who we've talked about, I called Pat. And I told her I'm going to be in Detroit. She goes, "Oh my God, can you get into Tiger Stadium?" And this was '03. And so we arranged it with the city of Detroit, and I got in, and Pat was thrilled. I sent her the photos, and it showed Tiger Stadium not the way I remember. It was in really bad shape, but you could still, years later, 5 years later, you could still smell the cigar smoke and the stale beer. And you could still picture Ty Cobb and the late Al Kaline and Willie Horton and Mickey Lolich and all those guys. It's like the Patton movie where he's looking over the battlefield and he hears the trumpets and the music playing. You can actually, in your mind, as a baseball fan, see those guys running in the outfield.
Yeah, and I miss old Comiskey, Bob. I mean, I love the way those arches were in the back of the grandstand, which were just so beautiful and cool. And I had just the way that park was configured, and I have great memory going in there for the first time with Steve Sachs when he came over from the Dodgers to the Yankees. And I was sitting in the dugout, and he came down for the first time, and he sits down next to me, and he goes, feel my arm. I'm like, what? It's like, feel my arm. So I touch his arm, and he's like, and he was covered with goosebumps, and he goes, I can't believe I get to play in this place. This is just unbelievable.
We in 2013, my mother-in-law, who I dearly loved, she had cancer and it was terminal, but she wanted to go to Fenway Park, and she wanted to go to Cooperstown because she wanted to see her son-in-law's photos hanging in the Sacred Ground exhibit, which I am, like Jean, I am thrilled to be considered in the Hall of Fame. So we took her to Fenway Park. As you know, you walk in up behind home plate, we're on the tour, and she grabs my arm and she looks at me and she says, "This is so surreal. Now I know why you love this place." And it was her view of it for the first time. And she's from San Diego, and she's just taking it all in. She's looking around at the green monster and the pesky pole, and she's looking for the red seat where Ted allegedly hit one. And that, by the way, is a long ways from home plate. I mean, that's like a $5 cab ride to get there. But, baseball speaks to people, as you guys know, with your grassroots. It brings out the best in people. I was a child of the 60s in LA, and I would, one of the transistor radio kids, I'd go to bed at night as a 7, 8-year-old listening to Vin Scully. So, I mean, I had the best of both worlds, listening to Vin for all those years.
Yeah, you did. You and Burt Bly love them both. Speaking of grassroots baseball, Bob, the Route 66 went so well last year that we have we're taking it as a not-for-profit to Puerto Rico. We had intended to this year, and we were able to have one clinic down there, Gene, that went really well, I thought, with Pudge and Carlos Baerga at the Boys and Girls Club of Santurce, which is where Orlando Cepeda's sister worked for many, many, many years. And we got to go to the Caribbean Series. Gene was shooting it, of course. And our hope is that our country and the world comes back and becomes safe again. But we need to be back doing grassroots baseball in Puerto Rico.
Yes, I agree with you. I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys can do down there, because I mean, you see the documentaries with the kids, like Gene, you can attest to this. The kids playing with a milk carton or a rolled up piece of tape as a ball in a wooden slat for a bat, but they love the game. they will play morning, noon, and night, and as you know, it rains a lot in the Dominican and Puerto Rico, and they wait for the rain to stop and then they go back out and play in shoes that don't fit, or makeshift gloves. That is baseball at its purest form.
Really is. And the grit and determination of those players with, just so little means is, it's so inspiring to see what can be accomplished. Places like the Dominican Republic, that there's more major league players from that, internationally, that is the number one country where players are coming from that are making it to the major leagues. A place like San Pedro de Macorís, where over 50 major league players come from that one small town. It's mind-boggling.
Jeff, could you explain to the people what the fields are like for the little kids that play the game, like what we were talking about with the makeshift gloves and bats and everything, how bad the fields are?
Yeah, the fields are, it's overgrown grass, and lots of times, lots of rocks, mixed in, it's not groomed, beautiful soil. It's rocky soil. It's overgrown grass. It's no backstop, or there's so many holes in the fence that you're chasing balls. I was shooting a game, I was in Cuba shooting a game, and they had this batting cage up that they were during the game, and I'm like, why? I'm trying to figure out why they didn't move the batting cage. It's becoming difficult for me to shoot because it was already like an unusual situation, and I'm like, how am I going to shoot the batter with this batting cage? And then they said, well, we have too many holes in our fence, and we can't afford baseballs. We can't lose. All we have is these 2 balls for this game, so we can't lose them, and we can't lose them through the fence. So we have to keep the batting cage up. And this is not a kids team. This is like a professional team that's playing with a batting cage in Cuba, and it's so it just shows you that what can be accomplished, really through with so very little, and and the adversity that these players start off with in their lives, not only in baseball but just in their lives, with places with no running water, there's just so much that they endure in so many ways, and Cuba and all the ups and downs that the country has had, and lack of food, and so to me, it's there an inspiration, what can be over, what they can overcome, and what they do for their entire extended family when they do, make it to the major leagues. And if they're not going to the major leagues, like you said, like not forgetting just the love of the game, the purity of the game, and the faces and the smiles, and the kids having just the ballparks are packed on Saturday afternoon in any ballpark in the Dominican Republic. Kids are playing, lined up. There's just kids everywhere. It's just absolute mayhem, and just game after game being played in multiple fields. And it's a wonderful experience to document.
And Japan now, it's a little bit different than the Dominican and Cuba. They're more, I guess, refined is a good word to use. They're more into the 20th century than some. And it's not a knock at the Dominican. It's just the way things are. In Japan, everybody's got nice gloves and bats and everything. But they're a lot more polite than they are here in the States towards umpires and playing the game. They play the game, I guess the best way to put it is the proper way, the gentleman's way to play the game. You don't have Billy Martin coming out there and using every 4-letter word you can think of, and not that Billy would ever do that, or Earl Weaver. And another thing real quick, you doing what we do, you have to have a thick skin if you're on the field, because if they find out you're weak, they're going to get you. The players, they love to needle, and they have the morbid sense of humor. I was in a dugout in Colorado Springs for a Sky Sox game, and I'm sitting there, and the game's going on, and the ball comes whizzing right by my head, and of course the manager comes running out to coach third base, and he flips me a batting helmet. He goes, "You need to put this blanket thing on. You're going to get killed." And it's just a morbid humor. But in Japan, can you explain how it is towards how much different it is towards our game and it is in the Dominican?
Well, it's just a cultural difference, and
Right.
it's what makes it so wonderful. Like the celebrating these cultures and seeing it really shows how baseball looks different, it's played different, and that's what makes it so special and so unique around the world. And Japan is a great example of the unique culture. In Little League, the kids all line up and they bow in unison at the end of the game to the umpires, thanking them. I mean, and it's just such a beautiful thing to see this respect. You know, when they come up for their at bat, they bow to the umpire. You know, in respect. There's just a respect for their equipment, and it's of course, you know, the culture of baseball in Japan. When they warm up, I mean, it's a warm up like I've never seen in for a Little League game. They run in unison, and the right knee goes up and the left knee goes up for the entire team at the same exact time, and it's fantastic. It just makes it so much fun to see, and of course the fans are incredibly unique. It's just a fun experience to see how they cheer for their teams, special outfields dedicated to special fans, and just trying to figure it all out took me a while. And there's a ballpark in Koshien that during the seventh inning stretch, they play this song and they release balloons to this song as they sing. So and you should just check it out on YouTube, Koshien, and the balloon release, these yellow balloons just all, you know, go up in unison, and it's spectacular. Jeff, you know, knows the culture very well and good friends with Ichiro Suzuki, and through him, and so you've had a lot of experience with Japanese baseball, haven't you, Jeff?
I have, yeah. It's as you said, Jean, it's just really kind of the differences in the culture. You know, the fans are very polite, as you said, Bob. You know, they serve scotch in the stands, which they don't do here, so that's different. You know, and the cool thing is the walk-up songs are sung by the fans. They're not coming over the loudspeaker and played as a song. So there's a real connection and bond as proper and segmented a society is. There's still that intricate bond, especially in baseball.
Well, this goes back to when all three of us were kids. I mean, we could not wait to get to the ballpark. I grew up going to Anaheim Stadium. I saw Nolan Ryan pitch in front of 5,000 people. I saw him throw 2 one-hitters. And opening day at Anaheim in '77, a fifth inning little gork by Bob Stinson, or he would have had another no-hitter. I mean, he was that dominant. And my buddies and I would go. We could not wait to watch Ryan pitch. But, you know, we knew every inch of Anaheim Stadium, Dodger Stadium. And we would be there when the gates opened until they'd kick us out. And we'd scour the like when the Sporting News or whoever came out with the schedules to see where the doubleheaders were, because we'd go to every doubleheader. And, of course, now they're split doubleheaders, which don't get me started. You know, I know it's all about money. But you guys, I mean, it was that's the way we were as kids. And I really would love to see games in Japan and see what you guys have been talking about, because it's like a different, you know, you see the games on TV, but it's not like seeing it up close and personal.
Yeah, there's a great chapter in Gene's book, Bob, The Grassroots Baseball, Where Legends Begin, that just has some incredible photography of Little League. Sorry to gush, Gene, but I'm partial to it. And Koshien Stadium, and Ichiro's got this great essay in it. And I think it just really paints a very, very nice picture of what baseball's like there.
Now, Bob, something for you. In Tokyo is the Baseball Hall of Fame in Japan, and the museum is a world-class museum. It's pretty incredible. That is something that we can't be remiss in mentioning, because, and Jeff you know, knows the Hall of Fame there really well, but it's certainly worth a visit. The museum is a special place.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. And, you know, we had the great opportunity there. Gene, you had that great chance to shoot Sadaharu Oh, and the folks at the museum were kind enough to go over and grab one of his game-used bats for a very special photograph. And it shows that they have that same sentiment as the folks in Cooperstown do, Bob, about really tying back history to allow everyone to enjoy it.
Well, the trip I mentioned in 2013 when we brought my mother-in-law, my nephew, and my sister-in-law to Cooperstown and Fenway, Pat arranged a private tour for us, and we got down, in the basement, the level where people can't go, and we got to hold Lou Gehrig's bat, and that was really a thrill. It's just being able to, just getting to Cooperstown, like we've all talked about. People who have not been there need to go. You will see stuff that you will just, Babe Ruth shaving kit and just want to, and all the medals and the stuff they used to, the World Series rings they used to have that look like, your high school ring, now with the big, $10,000 rings that everybody gets. But it just goes to show you how the game has grown and changed over the last 100 years. And I don't think there's any reason to change rules or anything. I think baseball should stay the way it is. That's just my opinion. I don't. I hope they don't go to electronic umpires. I think that's a big mistake. But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
But the hour it flew by. I appreciate you guys. Do you guys have anything else you want to say before we shut it off?
I would just like to say one thing, if that's okay, and that's the grassroots baseball, where legends begin. We have books at our website. If you're looking for a Mother's Day or Father's Day gift, although you better get moving if you haven't dealt with Mother's Day yet. But grassrootsbaseball.com is our website. We have books signed by Hall of Famers, and it's a good cause, and we look forward to sharing the book with as many people as we can.
Jeff, do me a favor, send me the link and I will post it on the Facebook page. And Jean and Jeff, I'm sure we'll be glad to sign a book if you buy it. I have to get my book yet. I got to buy one and have you both sign it for me. But it is a great book. We have seen the book. The photography and the stories are well worth your time. You will get lost in it. It's a great book. Jean and Jeff, you guys have both done a great job, especially with the grassroots baseball. And Jeff, you and I have known each other a long time. I want to thank you for coming on. And as soon as this little virus is over with, we've got beers waiting for us somewhere. So, and Jean,
I'm ready.
Yes, my wife is too. We're ready to get out and have a few and a restaurant or something.
Hey, Bob, I'll just leave you with these two thoughts from my perspective. Okay, you always talk about how national issues are related back to baseball, and the pandemic is no different. Of course, the one big term is benefiting pitchers, but it's benefiting hitters. It was just flattening the curve. We're all trying to flatten the curve. And if there ever was a sport designed for social distancing, it's baseball.
Yes, I agree. Jean, do you have any last thoughts?
No, just so happy to be part of this, Bob, and just keep taking your beautiful images. I can't wait for both of us to be back out there shooting again.
Oh, I can't either. I can't wait to get together with you guys after this is all over. We can sit down and actually talk and reminisce and tell stories. And because there's so many stories that we all have that we only have a short time to tell. We could easily eat up 8 hours. Because Jeff, I know you, being with the Hall of Fame for so long and the Red Sox and that team from the Bronx, you have stories that some you really may not want to repeat. There's things we've seen that you just laugh and you just like, I can't repeat that. Baseball players, especially on the field, as Jean, as you know, they all have a language all their own, and it's quite colorful.
It is. It's a lot of fun to be a part of. Our camera gives us that entree, and I'm grateful to have it.
I am too. Jean, thank you so much. It's nice seeing you again, and we'll see you soon. Jeff, as always, great talking with you, buddy. And you guys both stay safe, and we'll see you real soon.
All right. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.